Hello, students. Today I'm going to focus on an introduction to social living or living in groups. And so I'll take you to our PowerPoint slide. I thought I'd find a new place to record. This is my kitchen area. All right, let's get to my PowerPoint slide. So social living and introduction. We see a lot of animals living in social groups, and I've got some pictures here of some bison that live in huge herds, and just kind of fun. We saw those out in or near Custer State Park. Okay, so we're going to take a look at costs and benefits to social living. What are some of the different the types of social structures that we see? And then I'll briefly introduce you to the spotted hyena and an introduction to your small group assignment that's coming up. Oh, let's get us onto the full-on pictures, right? So what are some of the benefits and costs to social living? And we've clearly talked about this right at the beginning of this course, but let's review them. So I came up with a list of 6 or 7 benefits of social living that you might want to jot down. One of them is simply protection from physical factors. So if you're living in the Antarctic, for example, huddling together is a good option as a penguin. It's going to protect you from the environment. Protection from predators. Being in a group protects you from predators in a whole slew of ways. One of them is you can, as a group, repulse any predators. So think about bison or musk ox that, basically form a circle around their more defenseless animals in the group, like the young, and protecting them from things like wolves or other predators. There's also protection from predators because in a group, someone in the group is most likely going to detect the predator at an earlier time. So there's earlier detection of the predator. That gives you a chance to escape, a better chance to escape. Sometimes confusion can cause a predator to not be able to find you, if you will, in a group. And so if you're living in a big group, like you're a fish in a shoal or a school, or you're a zebra in a big, huge herd, it's confusing for a predator to view the whole group and to try to hone in on just one of you. And that's going to benefit the potential prey, right? It'll protect you from being honed in on and being captured by a predator. 3, it facilitates reproduction, right? It's easier to find a mate, and it's easier to defend your young when living in a group. And we can think of lots of examples of group living in which animals work together to defend their young, like bison, for example. It's here's number 4, my 4th benefit here. Improved location or finding of food. So it turns out when you're in a group, you're more likely to be able to find food. You find it faster and you can find more of it. And this has been shown in fish, for example, that live in shoals. Groups of fish, they're more likely to find food. They find it faster. And if you're in a more specific type of structure, like a lion pride, you are going to be able to find and capture food more easily in a group. You hunt as a group than when you're alone or when you're trying to hunt solo as a lion. The passing on of knowledge or traditions is easier in groups. So a lot of animals, like elephants, will pass information from generation to generation about how to find things. So where is the local watering hole? Where do we go to get food? This kind of information is easier passed along in social groups. And we see the passing of more information in social groups. So we see culture developing in groups that are social, like in primate groups and in groups that are living in hunting groups or in packs like wolves, in prides like lions. We see the passing on of information. It's much easier to pass on information. Number 6, a benefit, is the division of labor. So in some species, animals will live in a group, and each animal will have a certain role to play. This is particularly true in what we call eusocial societies, like wasps or bees. So in honeybees, for example, we have workers, and the workers are going to go out and collect the food. We have soldiers who might be defending the nest. We have breeders like the queen who are actually producing the eggs. We have caretakers, the nursemaids, that actually take care of the young that are being produced. And it's a nice way to limit the costs of life by sharing the jobs, if you will. Number 7, I also have that groups regulate aggression, this is kind of interesting. Living in a group, one of the major costs is, in fact, aggression, an increase in aggression. But we've also found that being in a group can help to regulate aggression or to downgrade aggression. And this is true in humans, and it's true in hyenas. It's true in a number of primate species as well. Being in and a part of a group, there is aggression in a group. Absolutely. There is agonistic behavior, but being in that group helps to limit or slow it down, reduce it. And because of things like there's a variety of behaviors that happen in a group, that reconciliatory behaviors that happen that lower aggression. So it's kind of a two-edged sword, if you will. The costs of living, one of the hugest costs is an increased competition for resources, for food, for shelter, for mates. And as the group get larger, there's more competition. What that leads to is more aggression. All right, so there's an increase in aggression in groups. The larger the size, the more aggression there is, because there's simply more to fight about, and there are less resources per individual, right? There's also an increased risk of getting disease or getting parasites. And so if we look at something like cliff swallows, they're a bird that lives in huge colonies, and they all nest in cliffs. They nest in huge colonies in cliffs. So you get a whole bunch of nests in one little area. Researchers have shown that blood-sucking parasites in the nest are at higher levels in bigger groups. The bigger the social group, the more blood-sucking parasites there are. We also know this from human situations, right? Back in the day when polio was scary, parents would send their children out of the city during the summer into the country to avoid getting polio, because polio tended to crop up in cities. Well, I'm reading a book now on Ebola, the Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone and Guinea, once the Ebola outbreak started, it started in a small population, but it spread quickly to the big cities, and the big cities were overrun right away. This sounds eerily similar to COVID-19, right? Some of these big cities, as I speak, big cities like LA are just devastated by the effects of COVID because it's easier to spread disease around. Another cost of living in a group would be an increased risk of attracting predators to the area. There's a big group of prairie dogs, says the fox. I'm going to go, it's easier to find the big group, and it's easier to find, frankly, a prey, a potential prey in a big group. As another cost of social living would be an increased risk of losing your young because of conspecific predation. Conspecific predation means predation by members of the same species. Does this really happen? Do members of the same species prey upon young? Yes. Infanticide happens in lion prides, for example. Male lions will sometimes kill infant lions in the pride. We'll talk about why that happens a little bit later in a few lectures down the road. And certainly in other animals as well, there are ground-dwelling gulls, seagulls, gulls, that live in big colonies, and researchers have found adults killing off neighboring gull chicks. Why is that? Well, it reduces competition for food. There are a number of reasons why it might happen. But if you're in a big group, chances are stronger that your young is going to be killed by a member of that group. And then there's an increased risk of raising offspring that are not your relatives. This is called being cupholded, and males incur this cost frequently. So, for example, if you look at songbirds pair up during, like cardinals, they pair up during the breeding season, and so you've got a male and a female that forms a pair bond. They build a nest together. The female lays eggs. They might both incubate the eggs, and then they both take care of the young by bringing food to the young, et cetera, et cetera. And you think, oh, that's a perfect example of a monogamous relationship, a long-term monogamous relationship in animals. And then you find out later that actually there's a lot of extra pair copulations going on, and the male at that nest might be raising young that are not his own. And that happens more frequently in groups than it does when you're living alone, living solo, right? So those are some of the costs and benefits to social living. Clearly, lots and lots of animals live in groups. Here are some of the social structures that we do see. One of them is a coincidence group. A coincidence group is really a group formed by coincidence or by accident. It's definitely not the result of an evolutionary event. It's not that evolution has driven this type of group to come together. So we can look at, all animals that end up at a watering hole. They're in a big group. There are lots of different species, but it's not that this is, evolutionarily adapted to live in this group. It's just that the water is there. They're following the water, so to speak. Or if you go to a GVSU football game, maybe someday you'll get to go to one of those again. There's a humongous group of people attending this sporting event. It's a coincidence, okay? Or birds migrating together. There's lots of examples. We're not that interested in that type of social structure. Survival groups. Now, these are groups that are formed by mutual attraction, but they're not groups that are related to breeding events. So a really good example of they form for a specific purpose, but not breeding is typical. So they might form because they're migrating together as to follow food. So wildebeests form enormous herds, apparently, in Africa. It'd be lovely to see one of these, right? And why do they form these big herds? Because they're essentially moving with the food. Every animal is a part of this big group that's basically seeking out food, and the food is moving depending on where the rainy season is, where the rain is, basically. Other examples of this could be a survival group that comes together for anti-predator behavior to avoid predation, or because they're seeking out a shelter, a particular location that everybody is happy in, is sheltered in. Differentiated groups are social structures that are really interesting, right? These are groups whose members have differentiated roles that aren't interchangeable. And I want to give you some examples here. And I've got little pictures of examples all about reproduction, but that's okay. So differentiated groups are groups that have evolved because they benefit. Groups that have evolved with individuals having specific tasks or specific roles, and individuals benefit from being in those groups. They have higher fitness because they are in this particular group, if you will. Here are some examples about reproduction. So there are all different kinds of reproductive groups, differentiated groups. One of them would be a harem. In a harem, one male, typically a male, defends a large group of females. And that male typically then gets to mate with all of those females. The females get essentially some protection, and they may act together to protect themselves or to protect their territory from other harems, if you will. There's a really interesting group of gelada baboons that are just pretty cool. I'll click on this YouTube video just to give you a feeling of what's out there. I'm not sure this is going to work or not. We'll give it a try.
Become your best with an online MBA from Purdue University.
Here's a nice little
A
ad.
world leader in business and technology education. Built for working professionals who...
Okay.
Ethiopia's highland plateaus are home to one of the most impressive-looking monkeys in the natural world.
I didn't like that. Yikes, it's not liking me.
Gelada baboons. Geladas live in small family groups consisting of a breeding male plus a harem of up to 6 females and their offspring. They're also known as bleeding heart baboons because of the distinctive red heart-shaped markings on their chests. But geladas aren't true baboons, just close cousins. Male geladas keep their status as head of the group by playing an incredibly caring role in the family. This ensures the support of the females. Geladas are the only monkeys that exclusively graze on grass, consuming every part of the plant. They keep in constant contact and sound just like they're all chatting.
This would be really
At
cool.
good feeding spots, groups of over 650 individuals have been counted. These gatherings consist of lots of different family groups and are the largest of any primate known. Families of geladas gather in these numbers to avoid confrontations with bachelor males that are always on the prowl looking to steal a harem of females. It's during these confrontations that the family males need the support of their females. Without this support, a lone male won't stand a chance against the rival bachelors. He needs to rally his females, so he attempts to groom one of them. Unfortunately for him, some recent misunderstanding means he's fallen from favor with the females. His call to arms falls on deaf ears. He's left to face the bachelor boys alone. Resistance is futile. The family male backs down, and the lead bachelor takes over his harem. But that's...
Okay, I'm going to move back into our PowerPoint slide here. So a harem is an example of a differentiated group. This particular video also gives us a feeling about aggression that we see in groups, and about some of the benefits of being in a group, and some of the costs of being in a group. We'll talk more about aggression later, and we'll talk also about alliances later, and that gave us a little feeling for that. But there are other animals that participate in pair bonding. So cardinals will breed in pairs, and they stay in pairs for basically year-round. And they're not fully monogamous, like I said, but they are pair breeders. And then if you look at the peacocks are, during the breeding season, male peacocks form what are called leks. These are small clusters of males, so you might have 3 or 4 or 5 males, all close together. And what they do is they show off their beautiful feathers and try to attract a female to mate with them. Typically, one of the males gets most of the matings, but the idea is you're in a big lek so that you can attract females to the area to mate with them. So different groups, different types of groups occur within reproduction. And the same is true for foraging or for defense. There are these differentiated groups, if you will. And this is not exclusive to differentiated groups, but there are also kin groups, differentiated groups in which members are actually related to each other. I don't know why I have this picture here. It's a great, that's coming from Twilight, I'm sure. In any case, these are kin groups. They're related to each other. So if we look at wolf packs, for example, often the alpha male and the alpha female is related to other members of the group, other females in the group. If we look at bees, Bees have different roles within their community or in their social group, but bees are often very closely related to each other. You might get a set of sisters, essentially, in a honeybee hive that are essentially all sisters to each other or very close relatives to each other. And we see this kind of kin differentiated group in a whole suite of places. Okay. So there's two important topics to explore with respect to social groups, and we're going to be doing this in our next lectures. I just wanted to mention them. One of them is aggressive behavior or agonistic behavior. It's definitely something that occurs in groups, in group life, and so we're going to talk about that. And two, not one, cooperation or cooperative behavior. We see helpful behavior, animals helping each other, and so we're going to ask about what types of help are out there, and in fact, how does helpful behavior evolve? That kind of thing. Those are the things that we're going to be headed toward in our next lectures. And then I wanted to introduce you briefly to the social structure of the spotted hyena, because I'm going to ask you for your next small group assignment to read an article about the social structure of hyenas, basically, learn a little bit about hyenas, and then find your own article that focuses on, on coalitions or alliances that animals, that these hyenas can form. And you're going to be doing this group assignment, turning it in, submitting it on Blackboard. But I wanted to just give you a quick look at hyenas. Now, spotted hyenas in general, have been given a bad rap. And they are really an interesting animal, and I think that the article I'm having you read points that out pretty well. It turns out that these animals live in social groups. They're called clans. Up to about 80 individuals can be in a clan. They live in Africa, in various places in Africa. And what's interesting about the spotted hyenas is these clans are matriarchies. The female, there's an alpha female that rules the clan. And females are dominant in the hierarchy over adult males and over juveniles. So we have this interesting matriarchy that's a matrilineal. The lineage is followed through the females. And this is unusual in animals, right? It's unusual in human groups as well. But it's pretty interesting. And the question is, why and how are females the rulers in these clans? And that's what you'll learn about in this article a little more. They also are sophisticated hunters who hunt in packs. 95% of what they eat comes from their hunting. We tend to think of hyenas, from things like The Lion King, that hyenas are kind of mangy and they're disease-carrying, horrible animals that are scavengers. Well, they do most of their own hunting, okay? And they raise their young in communal dens. So I want you to think about, what kind of social structure is this? How is it organized? And what kinds of alliances might we see in animals that live in these social groups called clans? So that's where you're headed for that small group assignment. There's an article for you to read. It's on Blackboard already, and you can find that, work together, and submit your group assignment at some point. That's the end of this lecture.